Hello everyone, I'm Sir NJ Javier and this is the 6th episode of EAPP in TAGLISH. In our last lesson, we discussed outlining and how easy writing can be if we practice it. For this session, we'll discuss for the first time a specific type of academic text, that is the critic paper. Pero hindi tayo mag-focus sa critic paper mismo, kundi sa iba't ibang paraan kung paano natin ito isusulat. Yon ay ang critical approaches to writing a critic paper. But of course, before we discuss each approach, let us first define what a critic is. A critic is a genre of academic writing. Gaya nga ng sabi natin kanina, it's a type of an academic text. As its name sounds, a critic briefly and critically summarizes and evaluates a work or a concept. Tandaan, it summarizes and it evaluates. Ibig sabihin, may dalawang bagay kang dapat gawin kapag magsusulat ka ng isang critic. Una, magbibigay ka ng brief o short summary ng bagay na kinikriticize mo. Pangalawa, ibibigay mo na ang iyong evaluation o yung pinaka-judgment mo sa bagay na yon. Also, a critic can be used to carefully analyze a variety of works. Halimbawa ng pwedeng gawa ng critic ay ang mga creative works gaya ng novels, exhibits, films, shows, images, or poetry. At iba't ibang media gaya ng news reports and feature articles. Before we continue discussing critic, linawin muna natin yung mga salitang ito. Criticizing. Criticizing means judging or evaluating someone or something. Ibig sabihin ito yung pagpuna sa mga magaganda, maging sa mga di magagandang katangian ng isang tao o bagay. Ang critic naman ay ang paper o yung essay na sinusulat mo kapag nagkikriticize ka. Ibig sabihin ito yung napoproduce mo kapag nagkikriticize ka. At ang critic naman ay ikaw mismo na nagkikriticize o yung taong gumagawa ng criticism. Balik tayo sa critic. Like an essay, a critic uses a formal academic writing style and has a clear structure. Ibig sabihin, sinusunod din ito yung intro, body, conclusion format. Pero, ang pinagkaiba ng critic sa ibang klase ng paper is that sa body nito, dun mo makikita ang brief summary ng bagay na kinikriticize, pati hindi rin yung detailed evaluation tungkol dun sa bagay na yon. But, why do we make critics? Bakit nga ba tayo sumusulat ng mga critic paper? The purpose of an evaluation is to gauge the importance, the usefulness, or the impact of a work in a particular field. Kasi gusto nating matimbang yung sense ng isang bagay. To know how well it is done, what message or messages does it render, and even how it can affect the field or the discipline it belongs to. Now that we understand what a critic is, let us talk about our very topic, that is, the critical approaches. Remember, there are various ways on how you can write a critic. And these ways are what we call approaches. Also, for this discussion, ang pag-uusapan lang nating approaches ay for criticizing text. Although, pwede rin nyo naman silang gamitin for other works, like movies and other arts, mas common silang gamitin sa iba't ibang klase ng text. Muli, pag sinabi natin critical approaches in writing a critic, it simply means the ways on how to write a critic. Mabilis lang nating pag-usapan ng mga techniques na ito at simulan natin sa first approach, that is the formalist criticism. Also known as formalism, the formalist approach claims that all literary works contain intrinsic properties and treats each literary work as a distinct work of art. Ibig sabihin nito, mas mauunawaan at mas ma-appreciate daw natin ang isang text by understanding the text itself. Paano? Tignan mo lang daw yung intrinsic properties niya. Yun ay ang kanyang elements. Halimbawa, nag-a-analyze ka ng isang story. You can criticize it by looking deeper into its elements like the characters, the setting, the plot, the conflict, the point of view, and etc. Look at this excerpt from a formalist criticism of A Rose from Emily published on victoriajcrossman.wordpress.com. As you can see, the critic discussed how the author presented the characters, setting, plot, and point of view of the story A Rose for Emily. Again, formalism is about the elements of the text you criticize. Para madaling tandaan, just remember formalism is about the text form. Now let's discuss the second approach, which I think is the easiest, that is the reader response criticism. This approach of criticism is concerned with the reviewer's reaction as an audience of a literary work. Ibig sabihin, you do not need to study the elements or look at who wrote the text or when it was written. Kung ano lang yung reaction mo as a reader, yun lang yung kailangan mo. This approach claims that the reader's role cannot be separated from the understanding of the text. Ibig sabihin, a text does not have meaning until a reader reads it and interprets it. Kumbaga, kahit anong text pa raw yan, pwedeng mag-iba-iba yung meaning yan depende sa nagbabasa. In this approach, you can criticize a literary work based on the message or messages it is trying to point out. And as guide questions, you can ask yourself about how do you feel after reading the text, or what are the lessons you learned after you read it. Look at this excerpt from a reader response criticism of the Three Idiots film published on studymoves.com. The critic gave emphasis on the lessons learned from the Three Idiots film, which are the pursuit of excellence through passion, the pursuit of success, the importance of life and its beauty, and the significance of hard work as well as the danger of living a mediocre life. Again, in reader response criticism, your own understanding of the text is what's important. The third approach is the feminist criticism. Also known as feminism, this approach focuses on how literature presents women as a subject of socio-political, psychological, and economic oppression. Ibig sabihin, kapag feminist approach ang gamit mo, ang focus mo ay nasa kung paano tiningnan o pinakita ang mga babae sa text na inaaral mo. And since we're looking at how the women are in the text, this approach also tends to reveal the patriarchal aspect of our culture. Kapag daw kasi nag-focus tayo sa sitwasyon ng mga kababaihan sa isang text, mas nare-realize daw natin how patriarchal o gaano kapabor sa mga kalalakihan ang iba't ibang bagay sa lipunan, gaya ng oportunidad sa trabaho, pagtrato, at maging sa simpleng pagtingin lang sa halaga ng kababaihan sa ating lipunan. Kaya naman, in this approach, you can criticize the work by looking at how men and women are presented. You can ask questions like, are the male characters powerful or superior in their position while the female characters are subordinate or inferior? Or are the male characters decisive while the female characters are not? Let's look back at the story A Rose for Emily and understand it based on the feminist approach. The critic explained how Miss Emily is very dependent on her father's decision, that she couldn't decide on her own happiness and she's controlled by her father. Again, feminism is all about the females or women. Finally, the last approach we will discuss is the Marxist criticism. Also called as Marxism, this approach is concerned about the differences among economic classes. Ibig sabihin, ang focus ay nasa kung ano ang pagkakaiba ng buhay at mga pinagdaraanan ng mga mahihirap at mayayaman. Kaya naman, it attempts to reveal that the ultimate source of people's experiences is the socio-economic system. Ibig sabihin, through the Marxist approach daw, nadidiscover natin na ang ugat pala ng lahat ng pinagdaraanan ng mga tao ay ang ating social classes, mga mahihirap, mga working class, at mga elite o mayayaman. Actually, you can easily use this approach in many Filipino teleseries because one of the most common story formats in the country is about the rich and the poor. Kaya naman, you can criticize a literary work based on how the socio-economic system is presented or maybe discuss the effects of classes, power relations, and social roles. Let's look back at A Rose for Emily and understand how the social roles are presented in that story. The critic explained the socio-economic ideologies which are presented in the attitudes and behaviors of Miss Emily, who belongs to the upper class, and the townspeople from the lower class. Again, Marxism is all about social classes, the rich and the poor. Before we end this session, let us first recall the four approaches we discussed. Remember, Formalism is about the form or the elements. Reader response is about your reaction as a reader. Feminism is about the females or the women. And Marxism is about social classes, the rich, the working class, and the poor. And that's it. That's our lesson for this episode. Thank you for staying with me until the end of this video. Again, please subscribe to our channel so you would be updated of our next episodes. I am Sir NG Javier and this is EAPP in TAGLISH.